So before we jump into the content itself, it's always helpful to know who we are and why are we here talking about human-centered innovation, and how might it give you a strategic advantage. My name is Prapti Jha, and I am, as already Georgina mentioned, Senior Design Strategist at Cisco. I specifically am a part of the organization called Cisco Secure. So essentially working with the team to think about cybersecurity in a more human way. And it's an interesting challenge to have. And also before Cisco, I was at Ford Motor Company working as an innovation catalyst there, essentially trying to just, again, bring the design mindset and skill sets to do better innovations and carve more, the roadmaps that are slightly looked at from a different perspective. Over to you, Harsh.
Thank you so much, Prapti. And thank you, everyone who has joined this session. We are really excited to be here, like Prapti said. So my name is Harshvardhan, and I work at Google for the Google Cloud organization. And I have recently taken up a role as innovation program lead. What that means is that I'm building innovation program inside of Google Cloud to help organizations find different opportunity areas for their problems and also build solutions at the same time based in human-centered insights. So who are we? We are design-led innovators. And when we say design-led innovators, it means that we base our solutions on human-centered insights, and we utilize design processes or design thinking methodology to come to those solutions and to find those insights. So going on to the next slide. Previously, we have spoken and collaborated with different industries and different companies, different schools, as you see. But I'm not going to emphasize that more, but let's go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about these companies. So what do you think is common across these different companies? In the chat, you can put your answers in. I'll just spend like 5 seconds on this one. What do you think is common across all of these different companies? Innovation. What else? Market cap, leaders in the market, longevity, public, all big names. That's right. Disruptive. Okay, so going on to the next slide. All these different companies, these are big incumbents in their industries, in their respective industries. These are using human-centered innovation and using design as a strategic advantage, something that we are going to talk about today. On to the next slide. But what do we mean when we say human-centered innovation? Or specifically, what do we mean by the word innovation? Let's get that clear. After you, Prapti.
What thing that you see on your screen is, first and foremost, innovation is not invention. At times we do think about, and when we think about innovation, we think about, hey, we have to come up with something entirely new that has not been done in the past. That is not true. And let's dissect these two terms a little bit more. So when we talk about invention, it essentially means creation of a product, process, or service for the very first time. And the picture that you see on your screen is of the ENIAC computer, the first computer ever built, the black and white picture that you see. Amazing invention, right? Like the first time, like kind of disrupted mankind in some ways, how we work. On the other hand, innovation is an idea that improves the value of a product, process, and service. There is the emphasis on the word value here, because there might be an invention already out there, but just like approaching it from how might we improve the value to the people who are using it makes it in an innovation. And that's why innovation doesn't need to be an entirely new thing. So basically, you see here, like, years of inventions and innovation led that huge, massive computer that you see on the top to a sleek tablet that we have in our hands these days, and even like smartphones that we use. And that's how, like, slowly we move from invention to innovation, and like it goes hand in hand at times too. Let's talk about why we talk about innovation these days so much. This has kind of at times become as a buzzword too, where it kind of loses its value. It's like really meaning, and that's like really important for us to set our thoughts around what we mean when we say innovation, and also why we need innovation and why we're talking about it. So the graph that you see on your screen was created by Patrick Whitney. He's currently at Howard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And he created this graph. And on the y-axis, you see knowledge, and X is time. And there is a line which says industrial revolution. And what it means, like before industrial revolution hit, people, when I'm a person and I need something, either I would make it for myself, I was so close to the product, or I knew someone or a craftsperson whom I would go to help me make that product, or he or she would make that for me. So that at that point, I was really close to what I wanted and what I was getting. And it was a really like close relationship. When industrial revolution hit, and that's where the graph really takes off on the top, there was like standardization and mass production, and everything was being produced in the factories. And that was a point when really what are we making was away from what people really wanted. And that's, you see on the bottom of the graph, which is what to make. So how to make is around like how to make money and how to make a product itself, like the feasibility part of it, the technology part of it. And what to make is what people really want. And the things that we can make, is it really serving to those needs? And in due course of time, as we have moving, oh, hold on, sorry. So we do see an innovation gap that has developed, and that's the gap that we're talking about here. And that's why everyone keeps talking about innovation, because we need to fill that gap to really be successful in the real sense. To make it more lively, and like, let me give you and like walk you through an example, and instead a story actually. So the picture that you see on the screen, does something seem to be off or out of place in that picture? Feel free to like add your comments in the chat box. Is something off? What do you see? What do you notice?
The tablet, the kid's computer, I'm seeing all the answers coming up.
Right, perfect. Yep. Yes, that exactly is the what is off. And let me tell you the story behind this and why are we even talking about this. So this laptop came out of, sorry, go ahead, Harsh.
No, sorry, I should have been on mute. Somebody saying, Rodrigo is saying, should be an iPad. Well.
I love that answer. Okay, so yeah, so why this story and why this picture here? So this initiative, the laptop that you see in the kid's hand on lap, is essentially was the initiative called One Laptop Per Child, and that initiative came out of MIT Media Lab. Amazing product. And let me tell you a little bit about that product itself, the laptop. It costed just $100, really cheap for a laptop. It needed really less amount of electricity so that the kid could literally charge it using his or her hands, as you do it with some toys. And also it was really rugged and strong. So like it didn't need to be just like limited to the school premises. You can like bring it outside, and even if it falls down, it's fine. So it's rugged, it can be used by the kids. But imagine what happened to this initiative. It failed miserably. And that's really interesting. Any guesses of why that would have happened if this was such a great product, no electricity required, essentially rugged and everything? Why do you think this might have failed? Any guesses?
So we are seeing answers in the chat: lack of internet, no electricity. Well, there was no electricity required in the first place. Lack of training, don't need a laptop, they don't know how to use it. Lack of need, what problem solving is there? Was not making money, a huge leap of faith from needing basic necessities to high tech. Well, I'll let Prapti answer that.
We are getting close to the real reason. Okay, so what ended up happening is the families of these kids started selling these laptops for money. And it was $100 was at times the family income for families like this. And this was the context that was 100% missed when we were coming up with this great product. So again, going back to the idea of innovation gap, they knew how to make a great product, but missed the whole point of what to make in this context. And it just shows like how bringing these two together is where successful innovation happens. So we have been talking about innovation gap. Now let's also talk about how might we address it if there is a gap and if you're not thinking about it. What are some of the ways that we can do that? So design thinking, as you see on this on the screen itself, is a way to bring what to make and how to make closer. And design thinking is just one way and one term that's used out in the industry pretty often, and that's why we're using it. For example, there might be different ways, or you might not want to use the word design thinking at all. That's totally fine too. But it's the whole methodology of like thinking from a design perspective. What it helps do is it helps reduce the gap between those two lines that you were seeing and bring it closer for a successful innovation. Again, you might have been seeing there are three circles floating around throughout this time, and while I was bringing this chart on the screen, any guesses of what that model or framework might be you might have used in the past, or any guesses?
You can put your answers in the chat. Double diamond, foundation, design value, features, desirability, feasibility, value. That's right.
Okay,
You're right
yes,
on point,
that's
Jamie.
right. Without spending more time. So exactly, this is a desirability, viability, and feasibility framework. And this is an innovation framework of like where actual innovation happens, or like successful innovation happens. And one thing that design thinking or design really emphasizes on is start from desirability, start from the human aspect of it, of what do people really value, then move to viability and feasibility, whereas like, should we make this, will it make us money? And then like feasibility is like, can we make this? That can go hand in hand, but like really if we miss the point of desirability, that really affects the whole success rate of the innovation that we are working on. And the innovation happens at the intersection of these three circles that you see on your screen. So I've been using this word design, also design thinking, multiple times. Let's decode what design really means so that we are all clear on the same page. Over to you, Harsh.
Thank you, Prapti. So off to the next slide, please. So let's talk about the term design, right? So when we say design, what actually most of the time comes to mind are products. For those who are in digital design industry, they might think of user experience design on screens, UI designs. In manufacturing, you might be thinking of cars, the aesthetics part of it. But here, what we actually are trying to say is the design process, what Prapti referred to as working from a design perspective. And sometimes interchangeably in this presentation, we would use the word design and design thinking. So when we say design, we're talking about design process. So what is the design process? So if you look up the word design thinking on Google, you will find so many different types of processes pop up. You might have already seen some of these: double diamond, somebody said in chat, some hexagons, some infinity loops. All these are different ways of talking about design thinking, but all of them mean the same thing. They refer to the same process. But before diving into what is design thinking, let's again talk about what design thinking is not. So going on to the next slide. Design thinking is not one specific model, something that I was trying to say in the last slide. It might be represented in different graphical forms. It is not just one model. One of the most popular model is the hexagons, popularized by one of the biggest design consultancies, but it's not just that. It's not writing on post-it notes. It's not about like doing some one single ideation session on the wall with beautiful different colored post-it notes. Going on to the next slide. It's not rocket science. It's not something that can only be used by designers or people who are coming from that background. It can be learned and used by anybody. So with that, let's talk about what is it then. It is the human-centered approach for creative problem solving. And one thing that we would like to add, it is a collaborative approach. It is designing for the people, with the people. And when we say with the people, we have highlighted that part of it. It means not only the end users, but also the stakeholders of the system. So it is a collaborative approach where you work in teams. It is a collaborative approach where you work with the end users. You try to understand them. You try to validate your products with them. So let's try to understand it in a very simple way that we have broken it down in. So this is a human, right? We have been talking about human-centeredness. So let's keep the human at the center and see how do we start. So we have to first start by understanding the human. And when we say understand the human, it's not about asking them, hey, what do you want? It's about asking them that question and understanding in their answer, what is the specific things that they value? What are their values? How are they driven by? What are the values that they are driven by? The next step is, then you get to a solution. It's not a solution-first approach. It is understanding the problem first, understanding the values first, understanding the pain point first, then only use that to ideate a solution. And the third step is test with them. You have a solution, it might work, it might not work, but it is always a good idea to go back and test with the users whom you talk to, or a new set of users, and see if the design is working or not. And whatever the results that you get out of it, do it again. It's an iterative process. It doesn't end. It's not a linear process that starts and ends at different places. It's an iterative process until and unless you're satisfied with your design solution and you are getting good results from your testing. So that's design thinking in a very simple breakdown diagram. Going on to the next slide. So we have a story for you. We have a story how we applied design thinking in one particular context. This is a story of a project that Prapti worked on. So I'll let Prapti speak.
Yep, absolutely. So let's look at the stories because story is the best form to remember stuff. And basically the goal that we have here is that the story would help us kind of show or give an example of how human-centered design helps us come with non-obvious outcomes. And what we mean by non-obvious outcome is like when a design brief comes to you, or when a client asks come to you, what is like, oh, let's do this, how we tend to go to a solution. And if you use a different kind of process, how that solution or final outcome might be so different than something one would have imagined early on in the project, and how that process gives you strategic advantage from a business perspective. So the story that we'll be sharing today is about Italy, Chicago. The industry is retail. Italy is a huge marketplace. It has multiple locations in the US, 3 or 4, not a lot. It still is exquisite experience. It is a marketplace. It has multiple Italian restaurants. It has a bakery. It also has a cooking school. So you can just imagine how packed the Italy is with different kinds of experiences. The ask that we got from the client was to help them redesign the store to improve the customer experience so that they could bring the customers back to the store more frequently. And the specific problem, one of the problems that they were facing was Italy is and was already very successful. But there was the people who were coming to the store during the weekdays was really less as compared to the people who used to visit the store during the weekends. So the staff at Italy was overwhelmed during the weekend, but really was overstaffed for the weekday amount of footfall that the store was having. What seems like an obvious solution in this case, again, because it's designing the experience and it's a store. So if we might think about interior redesign of the store, or maybe let's brand redesign, or how the store looks from outside to attract more customer, the layout of the store itself, to think about some of the, the ways to bring customers back more often. And also some of our solutions were around those, but I would highlight the one that was major and use the process to come up with something that was really unexpected. So how did we approach this ask? We started, rather than going to the solution and some ideas that the team might already have, we started with going from a very unbiased view and started observing the users. And there are multiple ways that design or design thinking gives you methods that you can use to do those things, immerse and understand from the users. One technique that we used is called shadowing, basically where you just go and you're just like walking with the shopper, not asking any question, just shadowing how they make the purchase, what things they buy, what they put again back on the shelf when they're confused, like just observing those things. Second method that we used was interviewing our stakeholders. So stakeholders was the shoppers, of course, but also the manager of the store, the staff that was working at the store, and really understanding the things that they had already observed, and also the pain points or challenges that the customers or the shoppers were facing, and the staff and the managers. The third and important stage and approach that Harsh already emphasized on is we collaborated with our stakeholders. So the primary stakeholders, the pictures that you see are the managers from the store, and we co-designed the solution with them. So the screen, the top picture that you see on this screen with like a lot of pictures, there was all the pictures that we took during the observation, the shadowing process that we did, the questions that we asked, and then we put it all there with the insights or learnings that we had from all that research. And then we collaborated with them to like share what we learned and their experiences, and also how might we really solve for those problems. One of the learnings, the biggest learning that we had was like Italy was seen as a premium and expensive experience. And there is an emphasis on the word experience because this was not seen as a store or that you'll go to get bread or milk. But the interesting fact was that Italy had those things that wasn't necessarily overpriced. It was the same price that you would get it at another, Kroger's or Myers or whatever you have, or like other grocery stores where you go for in your neighborhood. So what was happening was Italy wasn't fitting into the mental model of customers' regular grocery shopping from the customer perspective. But the people at Italy, the managers and staff, they thought like, hey, we have everything. People can come in and shop. And we also we have the Italian, specialities too. But we also have stuff that a regular grocery stores would have. So what we're getting to was like there was a huge value mismatch, the value that the customer was seeing of Italy as a place and the value that Italy folks saw they were providing to the customers. One of the non-obvious solutions that we came up with was grab and go meals. The sketch that you see on the left bottom was one of the initial ideas. When you brainstorm ideas, that's from that session. And the picture that you see, Italy Pronto, was the final thing that was implemented at Italy. So basically, the grab and go meals was a meal service where people can just hop into the store, grab a healthy prepared meal for lunch and go and just go to the office or wherever they are headed. And why this worked really well from a business model perspective was also Italy, where it was placed, was like around the offices. So it was in the downtown and there were a lot of offices around. So people really they hopped in for coffee in the next door and they would go and grab a meal, or like during lunch hours too. That really worked well. The other thing was that because Italy already had a cooking school and the restaurants too, there were chefs who were not necessarily, from a resourcing perspective, there were a lot of chefs and who could cook, but because there were not enough footfall during the daytime and the weekdays, this was a good way to use their time and really use that resource for some revenue generation, and also bringing people back into the store, even just for a 5-minute or 10-minute, but helps you with the business part of it. So now if we compare the ask toward the final one of the outcomes, it won't if we would have used the regular the thoughts and ideas that we initially might have, this would have not come up. So redesigning the customer experience, the ask, and non-obvious is a meal service for healthy meals for the folks. Now let's also I talked a little bit about the business, but let's now see deeply how this human-centered approach connects to the business part whenever we are coming up with a solution. Harsh, over to you.
Yep, let's go. And I'll kind of breeze through it. I don't want to run out of time, but yeah, this is a very common and very used framework by Roger Martin. He describes in the book Play to Win, which was co-written by Roger Martin and A.G. Lafley. So this is called strategic choice cascade. And if you have used it, you will see there are two important aspects of this framework, which is highlighted in yellow, which is around where will we play and how will we win. Now, this is usually done in the business context. This is used in business context to build strategies, inform strategies, future strategies, and we use a lot of marketing research. However, what the point that we are trying to make here is that you can also use design thinking methodologies to inform these things. You can use design thinking methodologies, or I saw somebody typing in the chat, contextual design or contextual research. You can use that to inform where do you want to compete, which is basically where we will play, in terms of geographies, product categories, what product that you're going to come up with. So in the case of Eatly, they came up with a service, which was grab and go meal. There you can look at the consumer segments. So they were targeting the people who are busy, who are going to office every morning, they are coming in for a coffee. Now they could grab a meal. What channels, vertical stages of production, etc. The other one is how will we win, which is the unique, what is unique about your service that is going to make you win. And I did see in question, somebody said, how did you go from a premium experience to a grab and go meal, which is a great question. Now, if you think about it, people already trusted Eatly for good quality and premium products. So when we put it in the form of grab and go meals, that the premiumness, the trust that they had was their competitive advantage. So that's how you can see how design thinking is already part of the strategic choice cascade. We'll show one or two more frameworks. So this is disruptive strategy or innovator solutions by one of the biggest innovators that we have seen, Clayton Christensen. And if you have not seen the framework, we are not showing the framework here, but if you have or have not seen the framework, you might have heard this terminology, which is used often in business, called jobs to be done. Whenever you are trying to build a new business, a new strategy, people talk about, okay, what is the job to be done here in the context of the customer? So how do you figure out what the job to be done is? You could do it with things like contextual design or design thinking, design process. You can go to the customer and understand them, understand what do they value, to understand what is the job to be done. And in the case of Eatly, it was help me eat fresh and healthy food during my busy schedule. Going on to the next. Again, you might have seen this business model canvas. You might already be using this. Two big things that business model. So before I go there, business model canvas is used to build new business models, for startups, companies, reinvent business models. And also some people use it to break down and understand what the business models are of different companies. Two big things that we want to highlight here. Can you go to the next one, Prapti? Next slide. Yep. So two things that we do here is lay down the value proposition of the company. So what is the company? And what is the company doing? And then the who part is basically the consumer relationships, customer segments, channels, everything that we also talked about in one of the other frameworks. So which constitutes of why. So design thinking methodology can help us truly understand who our customers are and what are their pain points, what do they value. So this is how we connect it with the business where it is not being done. And this is how we bring design thinking methodologies in different business frameworks. Going on to the next slide. I'll give it off to you, Prapti.
Sure. So story that we shared and the content that we have shared till now, if that sounds interesting, and if you might be already engaged with that kind of work, but if you're still curious about where can you learn more, some recommendation and suggestions that we have is if you are a reader, if you read books, either audio or any kind of book, these are some of the books that has really helped us. First, the top left is like the design of everyday things. That's more design focused book, but really helps you understand what really we mean when we say design and how it helps people and ends up like creating a great business if you are trying to do one. The other one, 101 design methods, that's like a dictionary for design. So it has like it is packed with methods that you might be able to use. And like, you can go to it when you're in a certain part of the process and say like, hey, what are the methods that I can use to understand my users better? So that is that kind of book. Change by Design and the Design of Business really helps understand the connection between design and business, by Tim Brown and Roger Martin. And on the top right, 10 Types of Innovation. It's an interesting read because it just helps you think about innovation from like different ways that you can approach innovation from. So it has like 10 ways that you can, differentiate your product. And then like if you nail 6 of those, it is high chances that it's going to succeed. So if you're interested, you can read more about that. And Communicating the New is, again, an integral part of it, because this book talks about how if you're trying to bring a new idea into an organization, how might you do it in the best way, because there might be some resistance, or there might, communication plays an important part of it. So it's not just one-sided in communication, but you are like communicating with, you're really being heard in your organization to make it successful. Moving on. So like the final two things, like, we shared a lot, but if 2 things that you could take with you, and like that is the biggest value from what we wanted to share today. One is fall in love with the problem and not the solution. So whichever situation you are in, really try to find what the real problem is. Why are we trying to do it, and not necessarily latch on to one of the ideas that we might have. The second one is always start with people, and those people are your end users, are the stakeholders, all the people that you're working with. So like starting with people and really understanding them. And these 2 things would really take you a long way when it comes to like applying the design mindset or the process in the innovation projects that you're trying to bring in your workplace. And I'll let Georgina talk about the next session that's coming up.
Yes, thank you both. That was fantastic. I love the way that you walked us through those examples and those principles. Next time, you can join us for a product chat coming up. We are going to be talking about the art of product pricing. So we are going to be talking with Jan, who's the head of pricing at Zoom, about what companies are getting wrong, and of course, how you can avoid them. So now we have the great good fortune of getting to ask a couple questions to our wonderful guests today. So there are a couple questions in the Q&A box already, but if you would like to ask a question, now is your time to pop some new ones in there. All right, so first question for both of you is a big one. I'm just gonna dive right into it because I know it's one that everybody is thinking about. Can you share some methods, narratives, tools, and approaches that you would suggest folks use to get their senior leaders and their executive teams to really start transforming their thought process to be more focused on human-centered design?
Absolutely. And I can take it, Prapti, and then you can add your thoughts. So this is a great question. And it really, I'm glad that you asked about senior executives because the approach is very different whom you are talking to in the company. In my current role, I get to talk with a lot of clients and customers where we talk with the C-suite and the senior leaders, trying to break down their problems. And one thing that has really resonated with them is that we spend a lot of time listening. And this is a basic human tendency. We love to talk about us and our problems. So if you use the same thing, we do a lot of interviews that resonates with them. But that's not all. You cannot just listen and excite them. You have to go back and tell them that, hey, these are the things that we listen. Does it make sense to you? Does that resonate with what you were trying to say, and do that collaboratively. Help them build the problems that help them frame the problems that you're going to solve. That's the first step for sure, to get them excited, to make them feel that they have been listened to and that you understand their problems. Now, this, in my case, we do this externally. If you are an internal, if you are talking about your senior leaderships in your company, then then it's like bottoms up. Then you have to go with some results. So what we have done in past in such situations, that we run a small pilot in our teams to use the process to solve certain problem, and we go to our senior leadership and show them the results that came out of it. So that's another way that we talk about it. So Prapti, if you have to add anything.
I think you captured it. Let's move on to the other questions.
Perfect.
Great. There's a couple questions in here about applying these principles to other industries. Someone has mentioned healthcare. There's also a question about, Italy is a B2C example, but what about B2B? Do you have any best practices that you can share about really kind of extending these practices regardless of what kind of industry or user base you're working with?
Absolutely. So I have some experience working with healthcare too. So I was engaged in a project with the University of Illinois, and they have a healthcare delivery design team. And essentially what it was doing was, not necessarily we were working with the patients directly, because in healthcare, there are a lot of restrictions that you cannot access, even if your end users are the patients, you cannot directly go and talk to them because it's a sensitive area. And there are a lot of things that needs to be kept secret. So what we were doing in that case was trying to create that experience better of the patient doctor engagement and what are the challenges that they were having. So we were essentially just talking to people internal to the organization. So the staffs, the doctors, the nurses, and other people who make that, that hospital or that healthcare area who work with them. So we really work, and essentially I would talk, the methods that we use are the same. So observation that I talked about in Italy, we were observing the interactions of the patients and the doctors. But what the shift that was there was we were using videos. So the recordings that we had without audio, because you cannot have those, we were observing their body language, what was not helping, how could we make the experience better. Example of how if there is a computer that the doctor takes notes in as the patient is talking, how might we improve that experience, because the patient might not feel comfortable as someone is taking notes, and that doesn't feel like the person is listening, but they are listening. So we propose having an iPad where they can together look at what the person is filling out and the patient. So that's just an example. So basically the methods remain the same. I'll also give you another example of my current role, which is an heavily B2B or entirely B2B, is one of the security products that we provide to the big companies. So they are a security product, for example, if I'll just use my previous employer, or if a big Ford wants to secure their, as we are all remote now and we are using our computers and devices from different locations, how might we make it more secure because we are not on premises? So essentially, the customer there for us are the IT people, the IT admin people who are deploying that software or the product that we are providing. And there we are looking at the experience or the challenges that they might have while they're deploying it. So again, using the same methods of understanding their end-to-end journey. So really end-to-end journey is a huge part of thinking from a design perspective, because it's not just one part of a product that you're involved in. The customer or the end user is using end-to-end. So how might we see that? So that's there we are enabling the IT person so that they can provide a great experience to the people who are using the security service in their company. So you see, this is B2B. So I would wrap it up. I would say the methods don't change. It's you just have to identify who your user or the end customer is in your case, and then work with them around that. So by user or end customer, it's not always B2C. It can 100% be B2B.
Really helpful. Hirsch, do you want to add to that?
I would just say I'm in a B2B organization as well, and what Prapti said completely sums it up.
Awesome. There's a couple questions here that are a little bit more tactical, and then we'll range back up to some of the higher level philosophy and approach questions as well. We've got some folks that are curious about how do you pick the right framework that's most suitable for the initiative that you're working on?
So when you talk about frameworks, there are so many, right? And there's a quote: frameworks are like toothbrushes. Everybody wants to use their own, and nobody wants to use others. So pick the framework that suits your audience, that suits your situation. Sometimes, for example, the one that we shared, which was the breakdown of design thinking, that's our framework. We use that understanding of design thinking to do this, to do the projects. The other thing is, if you like, even if it is a business framework or a design thinking framework, a lot of things defined by the situation, like I said, like your own context. So sometimes you might have to go for a sprint exercise, which is a 2 weeks exercise framework, or a 1 week exercise framework. Sometimes you have a 3 months project that you're working on. In that case, you can go for a framework that provides you a very deep dive tools and methodologies. You can use a couple of different research methods like surveys, interviews, contextual inquiries, etc. The thing here to remember is that the core concept remains the same. It's about listening to people, observing them, understanding their values, coming up with solutions, and then testing them. That's the core goal of it all. Prapti, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add one thing is also framework changes based on context. And I believe like Harsh already touched on that. So for example, if I'm in a situation where we have some ideas and like, or use cases, whatever we want to call them, and then we have to prioritize some of those. And how do we do that? And project managers do that, product managers do that a lot, and other people in the company too, is like we have some metrics, but like how design thinking or like design-led innovation changes it is, are those metrics the right one? Are they also capturing the customer experience, the human part of it, or the values that, or is it just lopsided towards business and feasibility? So like that's what you do. And what my go-to practice is, like if I have to use a prioritization thing, I'll just go Google, or like I have few books like 101 design methods and all those, and I'll look for the thing that would make sense in that context, in that project sense. And also like I would also encourage folks to not use a framework as it is at times. Like if you feel like one part of the framework is not making sense to you, just get rid of that part and like make it something your own, or like what your organization uses. So I feel like framework is like how you flex it, and once you use it once or twice, you know what would work best for you. And also like I think one other thing which is really helpful is what has worked in your organization. So just learning from your peers who have used some of those frameworks, and then like working together is something else that has also worked with, for me. So again, I guess Harsh and I, none of us like talked about a framework or the framework, because that doesn't exist in, I think, in both of our thoughts.
Awesome. A question that I think you might also have varying answers to is, which colleagues do you bring with you when you go to meet or shadow the clients, the humans having a problem? So what Sebastian has asked about, who do you bring with you to observe those people? Or is it better for that to be a smaller number? I can imagine having a crowd of 8 professionals over my shoulder while I'm trying to use a product might be a little uncomfortable as a user. So how do you approach that?
I can take that, and Harsh, feel free to add. So I've done it in the physical world when everything was open and we could like really, when the product was like, go to the customers and observe them, the example that you saw previously. So in that case, it's really important to restrict the number of people. We mostly used to do like 2 people at max, because like otherwise like the person would be like the behaviors would change that you're trying to observe. So in that case, like, and again, like you observe, or when you do observe or shadow someone, it's not just one session. There are multiple sessions, different times, because so that you can capture different, types of things that you might miss. So like in this case, like weekends, weekdays, morning, evening, and all those kind of stuff. So in that case, as the goal is to be collaborative, you have to bring the people who would, like the engineers or the people who would actually make that product, whoever are the feasibility people, the business folks also, like, because the team is like, try to bring each part of the team or the expertise that you need for a product to be successful to be in that experience. So that's in the physical world. In the virtual world or like remote world, it is slightly, I would say, easier at times, because like there's some research platforms where you can, like, for example, I made a quick MVP or a prototype of like there's a sunscreen or something like that, and that's something I'm sharing with the customer. Let's say I'm doing that. That's just other part of the design process, and the customer is just giving me feedback around like, I would do this, I would do that, I don't know what that is. On those platforms like that, you can have observers. So the participant cannot see the observers. That participant would just see me and maybe just one more note taker. So there's just 2 person who are interfacing the user, but there can be like, I don't know how much, but like I have had like 15 to 20 observers in the behind who can really listen to what the users are saying. And that is also a time when you can, if your leadership is really open, you can bring some of your leadership into those sessions and say like, hey, would you like to listen what the users are saying to some of the ideas that we might have? And I've used that in the past in my previous job, where the VP was like sitting and just observing that session. And that gives them really like, makes them feel closer to the product, which is essentially not always that they can do, or like they have the bandwidth and flexibility to do that. So yeah.
And is there an approach that you take if it's sensitive to observe the person? So someone's asking here if your users are making payroll or financial decisions, or you mentioned medical background. What are some kind of workarounds that you have for those kind of situations?
Yeah, so I can talk about the medical situation in the medical institutions. So the project that Prapti talked about, I was part of that as well. So we did not have access directly to the patients. So one thing, there were a couple of things that we could do. So we interviewed the nurses, we interviewed the caregivers. With permission of the patients, we placed cameras where we could record them. Those are the different way of observations that we could use when we were not in the room. We also had some exercise that we had asked our caregivers and nurses that we had access to complete in order to help us understand the whole scenario and situations. And this is true in many industries. You might not have access to the end users, but you'll have to figure out workarounds in where you can get those observations from. The next best thing is find a person with the access to the end user, and then do a thorough inquiry, interview with them.
Right. And also at times, rather than just asking direct questions, like for example, finances or something else that you might not like, you having an idea or say like, hey, we are thinking about something like this. So create rather than just asking them. Like there are 2 ways to research. One is just going open-ended and having a set of questions and asking people is like, how are you doing it? Show me this. So like, that's one approach. And it's more applicable to areas where are non-sensitive information. The other is, because there is enough, you can have a lot of research that can be done on the desktop. So that's secondary research. So you can do that. That's already available out there. And we might not have touched on that as much as we wanted to, but essentially that part of research is also important, because there is a lot of research that was done with the people that's being documented online. So essentially that's also very close to people. So use all those research, and in medical and all those things, we used to read a lot of research papers that was done. So use those things and create a point of view or some ideas or whatever your organization wants to call it, and then share that with the end users so that they don't feel like they are sharing their information. They're giving you just thoughts around what they would use or what they won't, if you're trying to make the payroll system better, or let's like whatever kind of example. So that doesn't put them on spot around sharing their information. So that's the approach I would suggest.
Really helpful. Oh, go ahead, Hirsch.
No, I was just saying yes.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
So there's someone here who's looking for a piece of advice, and hopefully you guys will have some good guidance to offer them, because it looks like they're in a situation where they are meeting some resistance to research. They're meeting some resistance to being customer centric. So they said, I have witnessed a dynamic where internally proposed solutions are not founded in customer centric research. And that is being empowered by the famous Ford quote, an example of, quote, if we listened to customers, we would have to build faster horses, right? So it seems like that quote is maybe being used to prevent innovation rather than create it in this scenario. So have you experienced this? How do you navigate those types of decisions with stakeholders?
This situation is not very unique. I can chime in and say that this is a similar situation when you're looking for a buy-in. Now, in this case, there is some resistance. So going in with some results, if you could pilot it at a smaller scale and go in with some results, you could help them see the value. That's one. The other thing is that quote, it's right. It's not wrong. If you would have asked people in 1900s what would you like us to make, they would say better horseshoes so that they can run faster, or faster horses, whatever that quote is. But that's where the word comes in, the value. What do people value? People don't value faster horses. It's the speed that they value. I think that's the point you have to make in order to make your leaders understand the value of this process. And the way that I see is that run a small pilot, do a side project, go in with some results, because these organizations are result driven. Prapti, would you like to add anything to that?
Quickly, I know we're almost at time. One thing that I think really helps is really understanding what are the metrics that the organization uses, or like the business metrics for saying yes or no to a project or an idea. Take those metrics and then add to some things that you see are missing. And then for those things, adding to, you need to have a pilot or a small thing where you do that, and then expand that metric and say, I'm not changing everything entirely. I'm just saying hey, we are looking from these 4 lenses. This is a 5th lens that we need to add to it. One that can be a metric, that can be something else, and show how it changes the value. And if you can have some examples, and to Harsh's point, some low stake projects, take it that it doesn't change everything, or it's huge a financial kind of a role to it, so that you can flex with it and change it, and show that. So examples are the best way, and also including people. So getting buy-in internally is also including as many people as you can. So you don't necessarily need to get to the leadership directly, but if, let's say, a person in HR is really has a lot of connections, or the person is connected to a lot of departments, how might we engage that person in a project that you're working with them to get them excited so they can talk about it? So creating, I don't know, there's a word for it, but creating people who can vouch for you when you are not in the room is also a great way to approach it. And the book that I shared, we shared, which is Communicating the New, is entirely about this, and is entirely about getting the buy-in, and how might we communicate about new ideas or bringing new ways of working, and really, making it successful in our organization. So feel free to read those, and there would be some good stuff in there.
I would just, it came to me just now. One of my friends who was working in a very B2B platform to sell large equipment, large industrial equipments. Those who are from Asia Pacific might know this name. It's called industrybuying.com or something like that. He implemented these solutions and used human-centered design without even using the name. He piloted it. He did that to solve problems, first smaller problems, and then larger inputs into the business. But he didn't even talk about it. So maybe there might be some resistance where people are not fond of the word, the terminology, because that happens as well. People might feel threatened by the fact that they might have to learn something new. So you could also start by solving smaller problems for your stakeholders, internal folks, and then show them the results.
Fantastic. I think that is a spot for us to wrap up for the day. This has been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation. For folks that are on the line, if you're a product professional and you want to learn more about this, you can check out our design course to really learn how to partner with designers to create more human-centered products. And if you are a designer, you can explore Pragmatic's new course called The Business of Strategy and Design. And that will really help you learn how to better communicate the value of your user-centered work and really strengthen those relationships with your business stakeholders. You can also go follow Harsh and Prapti on LinkedIn. I plan to go do so immediately. I'm so excited to continue learning alongside you guys. This was an outstanding session. Thank you so much for your time and your experience.